question on the Zoom which has come in, which perhaps the Assistant Secretary General be kind enough to answer. Matthew Stevenson, who's a researcher who's done some work on the crash, has asked whether the resources of Justice Altman could be supplemented with sufficient funds to pay for a specialist law firm to support him.
Well, I would say that one needs to look at the financial situation of the UN, which is at the moment somewhat dire. We have a budget which is essentially flat. We have additional mandates being added each year. And we're in the midst right now of a liquidity crisis because of the way the financial contributions, the assessed contributions process works. When a state, we have two large states which did not pay their assessed contributions last year, totaling, I think, about $600 million that's missing from the UN budget. And the consequence of that is that if the UN doesn't pay the amount that is budgeted, if they don't actually pay out the total amount of the budget, the contributions of member states, they need to get a refund for the amount that wasn't spent, even if the reason the money wasn't spent was because it was never paid. So it's a situation that sort of feeds on itself. It becomes worse each year. And in each of the successive years, recent years, it's become worse, and it's now the worst that it's ever been. There's a hiring freeze at the UN, and many departments, like the Office of Legal Affairs, we are given only enough money to pay our budget. So we have no money for consultants, we have no money for travel, and it is a fairly difficult situation. So I think in that context, it would be very difficult for additional funds to be made available to this, unfortunately.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, I'll just keep it two short questions, one for Moran and one for Susan. And for Moran, I'm just asking one question. I have like 10, but who paid the mercenaries that you're talking about? And for Susan, do we know anything else about Frank Evers, who was the Irish bodyguard who was also killed on this flight? There was a lot of controversy about him in the Irish press a couple of months ago because of the anniversary of the crash. Very little is known in Ireland. I'm wondering if there's anything else known for
it. Yes, just if you want to have a crack at that one, yeah.
I can't really add to that, unfortunately, but it is a reminder as well of Sweden has been very concerned in recent years to try and work out what happened. The US has not shown itself to be, and Sweden, of course, had so many of the people on the plane died tragically. The US has not made any effort regarding the 4 victims, a quarter of the number of victims. And Canada has shown some, and Quebec has shown interest in relation to Alice Lalonde, who the only woman on the flight. And from Haiti, I don't think there's been a whole lot of concern. In terms of Frank Evers, I think that that may be another situation where we're not really aware of efforts to try and find out what happened. On the other hand, there has been real interest in setting the record straight on Jadotville.
Yeah.
So maybe you could say something about that, about Jadotville, the changing opinions in Ireland, and how, I mean, we've heard that it's been very difficult for people in the families of the victims in Sweden because they were blamed in a sense. And in Ireland, the UN Irish peacekeeping force, they were blamed for mishandling things, which was clearly a completely unfair and trumped up accusation that they suffered as a result. I'm just wondering if you know more about that.
There was a government report written about that about 2 years ago that basically said that none of the Jadaville soldiers who survived were entitled to any kind of special medal of recognition for what they had done. And so there was then, there was an effort led by one senator to set up an independent commission of inquiry about what happened in Jadaville to kind of give the soldiers, who, some of whom remain alive, and their families the credit that they deserve. And they blamed the UN. They said the UN covered up bits because UN prestige was so important to Ireland at the time.